What are you? This is probably a question you've asked yourself at various times in your life, and in fact may have even pursued various spiritual paths to try and answer that question. Most people do ask themselves that question at some point in their lives, and most people quickly pass over because the answer is not straightforward. The naive answer would be something like, well, I'm a man, I work on a checkout, or I'm a programmer, I've got kids. And they might even go into what they own. So its definition is a purely functional definition. It doesn't really get down to anything significant. Various spiritual movements claim to have an answer. In the Gurdjieff work, the most significant experience of self is the experience of I am. Now this assumes that there is an I am to experience. And as you'll see shortly, that's an erroneous kind of idea. Or with Ramana, the Indian sage, we are awareness. And at the present time we have Rupert Spira, who's taken this idea and is telling people to be, in a very abbreviated form anyway, to be aware of their awareness. Again, treating awareness as though it was some kind of object that we can be aware of. Yeah, there is a kind of conundrum in that. More accurately, in my opinion, is the Zen notion that there is no I. There is no self. And in Zen meditation, people simply sit, maybe focus on their breath, and have no expectation of anything particularly wonderful. This is just a pure expression, and probably is the nearest to what we are than any of the previous things I've mentioned. And you'll see why a little bit later on. Let's go to a couple of philosophers who have asked this question. In fact, a lot of philosophers have asked the question, but two particularly. Spinoza says that we are desire. Well, if you can see it, you are not it. Whatever you can observe clearly is not you, because you are observing something external to you. So this desire must be something a little bit deeper than just, I want an ice cream, or I want to be a billionaire, or I want one of those new Mercedes-Benz cars. The desire, I think, is probably a little bit deeper than that kind of thing. And in fact, Schopenhauer expands on that idea by talking about the will to live. Now this will to live is a very deep thing. It's rooted in all of us. And to some extent, as far as Schopenhauer is concerned, that is what we are. This drive which we actually have no control over, in fact in many ways we can't even see. This drive to persist in our existence. to exist. But even there, I think the notion is inadequate. So let's get into a little bit of philosophy because it will be useful. We can divide the world into subject and object. A subject is a thing that experiences. Objects are the things that are experienced. So, thoughts are objects because we experience them, we see them. Emotions are objects because we can see them and experience them. And obviously, what we call the physical world is also composed of objects. We could substitute the word phenomena for objects. Things that happen, things that are, things that manifest, phenomena. Spinoza called these things modes. Phenomena are things we can experience. We, on the other hand, are subject because we experience them. Whenever you experience something, then you are experiencing a phenomenon or an object, whatever word you want to use. Now here's an interesting thing. Every night, most of us experience some period of deep sleep, deep dreamless sleep. A period during which we are absolutely not conscious at all of anything. And in fact, if you've had an operation, then one minute you'll see someone injecting the anesthetic, and the next minute you'll hear noises in the room, and you wake up, and for a couple of hours or however long the operation took, you just did not exist, in the normal sense anyway. Why? Because the nervous system closed down and was not aware of any objects, no thoughts, no physical objects, no emotions. There were no objects for the subject, which is you. And if there are no objects, there cannot be a subject. This is it's a symbiotic relationship. Subject and object both need to exist for there to be experience. There needs to be an experiencer, and there needs to be things which can be experienced. If there's no subject, there are no objects. And you're going to say, well, if there are no people looking at things, then the things still exist. Well, how do you know they still exist? You're going to suggest, aren't you, then somebody else is looking and yeah, they still exist, but then you've got another subject. So there's no way we can validate that anything exists if there are no subjects, i.e. things that can experience, things that are conscious. Similarly, if there are no objects, no phenomena, no things to be experienced, there's no subject, which is what happens in deep sleep, what happens during an anesthetic, during an operation. So at that time, those times, your subject does not exist because there are no objects. I apologize for the philosophical lingo, but it's really important. Because, for example, and I'm not getting at this guy, he does a lot of really good stuff, but Rupert Spira, I saw one of his videos talking about what happens during deep sleep, because of course it's a it's a nagging little problem, isn't it? We can be aware of awareness, but hold on a minute, what happens during deep sleep when we are not aware? If we are awareness, where has that awareness gone? Well, he comes up with some sort of kludge, some sort of, what appears to me anyway, complicated explanation. As soon as it starts to get complicated, then you know that you've lost the essence of the the essence of the argument. So here's the rub. Because you are subject, you cannot know what you are. You cannot know it. Anything that you think you are, I am, awareness, the breath, whatever you want to say is the essence of your being, desire, all those things are not you because you can observe them. If you can observe something, it is not you. The things you observe are object, they're phenomena. The thing that is doing the observing is a subject and cannot exist without the objects. So, because you cannot observe what you are, you will never know what you are. Annoying, isn't it? This was sort of confirmed to me once by a very wise old lady I knew, someone who'd known Gurdjieff. And she said to someone in a meeting, this character was talking about I am and all that kind of thing. And she just stopped him in his tracks and said, "You don't know what you are." Now, unfortunately, this particular person interpreted that to mean that not knowing what he was meant that actually he was really some magnificent character who had yet to be realized within himself, but that wasn't what was being said. You can never know what you are. Put that in your ego and let it meditate on that one. So, the nearest thing I can think of in terms of practice that approaches the truth is Zen meditation, because it makes no assumptions. We're not clamouring after consciousness, we're not clamouring for awareness, we're not clamouring for I am. We're just sitting with our eyes open, although not hard focused on anything, and being. Being the subject that we are. So, for all those people who are looking to build a body that would survive death, and I have to agree with Albert Einstein, who said that the most crass manifestation of egoism is the desire to survive physical death. I personally have no desire for that. I quite like deep dreamless sleep. In fact, it was Socrates who said that the sweetest experience a man can ever experience is deep dreamless sleep. It doesn't get better than that. And for all the life junkies who are looking for pleasure in life, let me assure you that there will be, unfortunately, an equal amount of pain. That's just the way it works. So if you want to skip out of the duality of pleasure and pain, then something like deep dreamless sleep is experienced by you every day, probably. So you know what it's like to be outside the duality of pleasure and pain. So, on that note, I hope that you've gained some kind of insight into what you are. Namely, no insight at all, because you cannot know what you are.